This video is possible thanks to contributions to the Existence University Patreon by viewers like you. Thank you. This video is a special thanks to my first 500 subscribers. What is psychoepistemology? Psychoepistemology is a science which branches off of psychology, and it deals with studying action, the action of the conscious mind, and how content is filed in the brain. Motivation is the other branch of psychology, which studies the content that exists in the brain as a result of the actions of the conscious mind. According to Ayn Rand, psychoepistemology is the study of man's cognitive processes from the aspect of the interaction between the conscious mind and the automatic functions of the subconscious. This distinction between the conscious mind and the subconscious exists only abstractly. The operations of these parts would be impossible without the other. To make an esoteric example out of this, quarks, the subatomic particles that make up protons and neutrons, come in 3 parts. These kind of quarks cannot be less than 3, and the energy that it would take to separate one of the quarks from the other 2 is enough energy to create new quarks, thus remaining at 3 quarks each. This analogy breaks down since you cannot separate the conscious mind from the subconscious and make a new subconscious and conscious respectively from the separation. But the point stands that you cannot separate the conscious mind from the subconscious ever, and that any distinction is an abstraction and not a suggestion of separate entities. The subconscious is basically just your physiological brain and its wiring. The conscious mind is like a living fire that moves around your brain and can space out, grow, shrink, ignite more flammable regions quickly, and the region of your subconscious that gets consumed by the fire temporarily becomes a part of the conscious mind. The goal of clinical psychoepistemology, which is what this video mostly concerns, is to learn how to control that living flame. Without that living flame, your conscious mind is reduced to the spark that your subconscious mindlessly sends up. By learning how to keep that flame alive, you change your brain and therefore your subconsciousness, thus changing whether you receive unasked for intrusive subconscious thoughts or not. Let's really step into this video now. You are born a blank slate. The only things that you could write onto your slate were the objects in reality around you and yourself as you exist in reality. Everything that is written onto your slate was written there by your focused action. The way in which you wrote onto your slate will affect the way in which you are able to recall what is on your slate. The more you focused on the essentials of the objects around you, the better you are at recalling that written on your slate. The slate that you have been writing on is analogous to the neurons that you are connecting in your brain. So first, we need to ask ourselves if we have filed all of our concepts by the proper essentials. We do not need to find an example of a concept we have filed incorrectly, nor do we fully need to know what that means right now. But we do need to consider whether it is likely that we have never accidentally misfiled a concept, filed by a non-essential characteristic. Or, otherwise stated, we ask ourselves whether we believe we are infallible or not. Since it is likely that we have one or more concepts which are improperly filed, we need to hold on to the context that we are not infallible, and that going forward, we will have to admit and fix the mistakes we find on the way through our thinking. From my current position at my desk writing this, there is no way for me to know the extent to which you will discover the state or possible wreckage of your subconscious as you carefully move your living flame of consciousness through the various regions of your brain. But I do know that as long as you remain honest with yourself, there is nothing you cannot overcome, nothing you cannot repair or regrow, and you will come to thrive. Secondly, we need to understand the interaction between the conscious mind and the subconscious. A subject which, for more clarification, I would suggest you watch Dr. Harry Binswanger's 4 lectures on the subject. But for a quick, intuitive sense of the interaction, we can play a short game. We can move around your brain and interact with different regions of your subconscious. If you simply stay focused on hearing and understanding the following sentences, you can make a trip around your brain or subconscious. 2 plus 2 equals. A chain is only as strong as its weakest. Can you hear that white noise around you? Can you see that red thing near you? Where in your mouth is your tongue placed? How many legs does a dog have? What is an apple? What is this? On hearing the above examples, a focused conscious mind focused on understanding what it was hearing and reading and seeing. Having consciously repeated what it heard, and the regions that hold the folders to those words which needed to be understood became ignited as the fire spread to all the relevant subconscious regions. And in response to the activation, the subconscious sends up the answers. The best way to prevent someone else from getting your subconscious to answer questions you didn't consciously want answered would be to not consciously focus on what they are saying, to blank out, and consciously focus on something, anything else, and to not hear the question at all. Otherwise, if you think it consciously, the subconscious will retrieve it or file it without hesitation. When the conscious living flame activates the subconscious brain region that contains the information, that region becomes a part of your conscious mind, and it falls away when you move the flame to other regions. All the above examples demonstrate that your brain wiring is holding on to information that you are always capable of pulling up, but are usually unaware that you are always holding that information, as the awareness of what you are aware of is tied to the moving flame of consciousness. Learning to control that flame, then, is about understanding that your subconscious is constructed by your conscious efforts, and that it is constructed by neural wiring. And like all electrical-like wiring jobs, proper wiring will result in lighting the correct regions, and random sparks won't pop up to hurt you. And in improper wiring, short circuits and shocks become all too common. For example, if you have never properly learned the meaning of numbers, the first example of 2 plus 2 equals would not result in the automatic subconscious answer 4. Say if the learner learned that numbers existed, but not as representatives of quantity, and the order they learned the numbers changed yearly, such that they learned one year 3, 5, 6, 7, 4, 1, 9, 2, 8, and the next year they were presented those symbols in the order 8, 4, 2, 6, 5, 7, 3, 1, 9, and so on throughout the years. In that case, getting the prompt 2 plus 2 equals would not be able to pull up anything. One needs to have defined 4 as being a quantity which is 2 more than the quantity of 2, or 1 more than 3, and 3 being a quantity which is 1 more than 2, and 2 being a quantity which is 1 more than 1, which is a quantity of a lone object. Even in the example of seeing a red object near you, the perception can be done without knowledge, but if all you were capable of was perceiving color but not conceiving color, then the questioning prompt would be meaningless to the perceiver. In order for you to become aware of red objects after the prompt, required that you know the difference between colors, and that your brain was ignoring the color of objects because seeing the color was not essential until the prompt brought that concept to the forefront. This is the basic introduction to the interaction between the conscious and the subconscious. If you need more time to understand psychoepistemology theory, see Dr. Binswanger's psychoepistemology lectures. So finally, what are we going to do about it? The premise of this video was, by learning how to keep that flame alive, you change your brain, and therefore your subconsciousness, thus changing whether you receive unasked for intrusive subconscious thoughts or not. We then admitted to ourselves that we are not infallible, and that it is possible that somewhere, at some point, to whatever degree, we misfiled something, and that keeping our files organized is in our best interest, and so if we find a misfiling, we will correct it. We then took a brief introspection of the living flame and the subconscious brain pulling up files automatically, and that it is that conscious activity which connects brain regions. Neurologists say, neurons that fire together wire together. It is a physiologically observable event, but the expression lacks the full picture. The conscious mind is the cause of the firing. It is when the conscious mind is forced by the laws of logic to ignite two different regions yet unconnected to one another that the conscious flame, the mind, the active thought of that connection wires those regions together. In this way, you can see how volition is a type of causation. The connection of the logical conclusion cannot be done without the conscious mind actively engaging in the thought, but the resulting conclusions come from linking reality together by a certain method. These connections can be a result of failed logic, but the thinker, unaware of his error, believes himself to have deduced a logical conclusion. Now we consider an example where we have found a concept that we hold and are now questioning as to whether this concept was filed correctly or not. How can we tell? And what are we going to do about it if we find that it is filed wrong? Let's take as a silly example Santa Claus. Children are often taught that Santa Claus is a real person with magical abilities, and that he travels the world leaving gifts to good boys and girls, and coal to bad boys and girls. To children taught this, possibly including yourselves, they file Santa Claus into the folder of adult humans, possibly in a subfolder of popular humans, with his differentia being a magical human being that rewards good children. Children then spend varying amounts of time thinking about Santa, writing to Santa, looking for Santa out in public. You will find children that see an old man with a white beard, and they will go and tell that man what they want for Christmas, because they genuinely believe that that man is Santa. Then one day they learn that Santa Claus is a fictional character. He is not real. It was all just a lie for the parents' and children's amusement. Before children's brains can rewire Santa Claus into a new parental perspective, say within the first few years after learning the truth about Santa, children still have Santa filed as a real person, and when they see a bearded man, the automized subconscious response when seeing that white bearded man, the first spark from the subconscious to the child's conscious mind is Santa, which then may follow into the thoughts that Santa isn't real, but maybe, just maybe, if magic is real, then maybe the adults have just lost the belief in magic, and maybe this really is Santa Claus shopping at Walmart. If you were taught this about Santa, or, similarly, you were taught a religion or political system to which you don't believe in anymore, if you have experienced that, introspect into the ways in which you used to think before learning the truth, the ways you thought just after learning the truth, which can include multiple years of learning to deal with it, and the ways you thought of it years after getting over the lie. When you find a concept that you hold that you don't feel is properly filed, use your subconscious automized responses to check on your current thoughts. Maybe it would also help writing those thoughts down on paper to enable you to find the keywords and steps that led you to that conclusion. The key to your questioning your conceptual file folders is to ask yourself, is this concept defined by its essential nature, or was it filed by non-essentials? What does it mean to be essential? Let us turn to Ayn Rand's Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, the chapter Definitions, where Ayn Rand provides what she calls the rule of fundamentality. When a given group of existents has more than one characteristic distinguishing it from other existents, man must observe the relationships among these various characteristics and discover the one on which all the others, or the greatest number of others, depend, i.e., the fundamental characteristic without which the others would not be possible. This fundamental characteristic is the essential distinguishing characteristic of the existence involved, and the proper defining characteristic of the concept. Metaphysically, a fundamental characteristic is that distinctive characteristic which makes the greatest number of others possible. Epistemologically, it is the one that explains the greatest number of others. For instance, one could observe that man is the only animal who speaks English, wears wristwatches, flies airplanes, manufactures lipstick, studies geometry, reads newspapers, writes poems, darns socks, etc. None of these is an essential characteristic. None of them explains the others. None of them applies to all men. Omit any or all of them, assume a man who has never done any of these things, and he will still be a man. But observe that all these activities, and innumerable others, require a conceptual grasp of reality, that an animal would not be able to understand them, that they are the expressions and consequences of man's rational faculty, that an organism without that faculty would not be a man. And you will know why man's rational faculty is his essential distinguishing and defining characteristic. Returning to our silly example, Santa Claus has a characteristic, which is that he is said to be a human man. And his specific characteristics is that he is a magical man. But if you take all the characteristics of Santa, the living in a place that doesn't exist, there is no glacier in the North Pole, only sea ice. He never dies. He can see all the boys and girls in the world at any time. He can fit into any size chimney pipe and can emerge from a fireplace that doesn't exist in every home. Can travel the world and visit nearly every home in a single night. Being a man doesn't explain any of these characteristics. Magic is the thing that explains all of the other characteristics. So Santa has as an essential that he is magical. He could be an angel or an alien, and all the rest could remain the same Santa Claus we know and love. If magic is Santa's essential characteristic, how we define magic becomes the next file to check. Is magic real or fictional? Magic's essential is being that which cannot be explained by cause and effect of physical interactions, cannot be explained by science or reason. And if it could be explained by science or reason, then it would not be magic. So the essential characteristic of magic is that it doesn't exist in reality, and is only a fictional literary device to enhance stories that are not meant to be representations of reality. In thinking of your conscious subconscious in this file folder manner, you are not merely rearranging abstract ideas on abstract shelves and abstract filing cabinets, but you are in fact activating the regions of the brain which hold these concepts and their definitions, and physically engaging new connections between neurons, thus changing the physical cytoarchitecture of your subconscious. By defining your concepts by essentials, you are thus restructuring your brain's neural network such that each basic concept explains the greatest number of others above it, meaning that your mind is integrating everything together based on first principles and first generalizations, and thus increasing your ability to think clearly and concisely. This reconstructive process of rewiring your brain to focus on essentials builds with it the cytoarchitecture of the conscious mind as the essential feature of your rationality, and therefore that living flame becomes nearly impossible to extinguish, and equally destroys the cytoarchitecture that allowed your subconscious to spark random intrusive thoughts without that conscious mind as a guide. In summary, be consciously aware of your subconscious automatic answers. Conscientiously judge whether that answer is filed by an essential. If the answer is not filed by its essential, find its essential and consciously redefine that concept. The conscious action of consciously redefining your concepts changes your brain's cytoarchitecture, strengthening your ability to use conscious awareness to control your automatic subconscious, as the subconscious physically changed because of your conscious awareness and action. Your new clarity of thinking will make it easier to discover essentials, and the process continues to strengthen itself as you reach closer and closer to that rational moral perfection. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to share. If each one of my 500 subscribers were to share this video and only one of their friends were to like it, that would still double me up to 1,000.